Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the JS Mindset Weekly Call. My name's Denny. Today is Saturday, August 29th. We are at the end of August. On the call today, we have Jim Sinclair, Bill Holter, and Dave. The political party conventions are over, and the Fed's meeting at Jackson Hole, Wyoming is over. In my own interpretation, there can be no clearer sign for optimism for gold and silver and mining shares. The Fed essentially has surrendered and is no longer going to bracket inflation remediation measures. And combine that with the riots in many of our cities, and all I can say is, buckle up, Buttercup. Things are about to get dramatic. Each week we get the opportunity to ask questions of Jim and Bill and Dave. If you haven't noticed yet, many of their answers to our questions over the last couple of years have forecasted exactly the conditions within which we find ourselves today. It's not that they're oracles or mediums. They are just three guys with extremely focused, logical economic minds that can decipher the financial and currency calculus that is right in front of us. Before we get to the questions, be aware that in our conversation today with the boys, it's pretty important to remember we are not giving anybody investment advice. What we are trying to do is share our own personal perspectives of the economic world. Now, you can choose to add it to your own perspective, or you can choose to ignore it. In the end, we want you to be prepared for what might certainly be some very trying times. Guys, I sent you some questions I was going to ask, but I'm going to open the show today with one quick question. And I guess, Bill, I'll start with you, and then Jim and Dave, you can chime in on this first question. Something changed this week, and I'm not sure exactly what it was, but I think it was a sense of personal vulnerability. It's been building up a little, brick by brick each week since late March. That's when the pandemic became part of our lives. But last week, watching the riots, watching Rand Paul trying to get to his hotel, watching all of this, something clicked with a lot of Americans, and it was like everybody all at once said the same thing that Dave has said for 10 years. Get me the hell out of here. Now, the psyche of the average American has changed a lot in the last 150 days, but something happened last week, Bill. Did you feel it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it could be summarized with the reporter from CNN standing in front of all kinds of stuff that's on fire saying that they're peaceful protests. I think people understand that these riots are not riots. They're lootings. They're financed lootings. People, I think I read the number is, because they're talking about defunding the police, 81% of the black community wants the same or more police, and yet they're howling for defunding the police. Well, when your city is on fire, should we have less fire department? When your city is under siege, should we have less police? And I think the American people, it doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat, Independent, the average person just wants to be safe. They just want to be able to go to work, their kids go to school, and not feel threatened. And I think that's what's happened, is that they've pushed this too far.
David, how about you? Did you sense a change? I know you don't watch television, but you certainly cruise media through the Internet. Did you sense a change this week, David?
Well, I don't know if it's this week, Denny. I've been watching this for a long time. And let's jump back to Hong Kong real quick. Because for the longest time I heard Hong Kong was peaceful protests. And I'm like watching the news going, I don't know what you people are looking at, but these kids are smashing people's heads in with bricks. They're burning down the malls. And Oh, that's democracy at work. Well, one man's protest is another man's riot. It depends on where you're standing and where you're looking. I think what the public's getting, again, what we have to be really careful of is Catherine Austin Fitts has done some excellent work on who's going to benefit from burning down these cities. What private equity group's going to come in and buy up this property for 10 cents on the dollar and then get government funding to rebuild it? So, I think this is a process. It's a process that they're leading the masses to where they want them. The same way a dog herds sheep. And I'll use as a quick example with that is, years ago, anti-gunners, what good's are guns? Well, I knew where they were going to go with this. They're going to get it to the point where pretty soon, even people who are pro-gun are going to give up their own personal rights for safety. And as I said with the coronavirus, the people in charge have control of the volume. They could make the volume whatever they want. It's like agitating a dog. Well, if you run up and down the fence every single day with a stick, that German Shepherd's on the other side, freaking out. And then all of a sudden he jumps over the fence and he rips your face off. And, I told you, he was a mean dog. Well, if you didn't tease him every day, he wouldn't have ripped your face off. Well, and again, I don't want to say it was this week, but we're going through a process. And processes take time. You lead people where you want them to be. That's what governments do. And again, we saw this in Germany a couple of weeks ago. Germany had a massive protest, well over 1 million people. Yet the media said, oh, no, there's maybe 100,000. No, Germany was freaking out. You can't make us wear masks. You can't lock us in the house. I'm amazed that Americans have been as complacent about this as they have been. And the reason why, Denny, is because they've divided us to conquer us. In Germany, the people literally, 1 million people in Germany is a lot of people because it's not that big a country. So, again, it's a process. They're hurting us just like sheep. And as you've said, or we said last week, this is bread and circus. And they're bringing out all the clowns. So be very careful here going forward because, again, this is a clown show like none that I've ever seen. I mean, the stuff going on in these cities is absolutely out of control. I understand problems, and I understand how to address them. And by just destroying everything, you're not addressing anything. You're just, you're just savages. You're like the dog that's jumped over the fence, and now he's ripping everybody's face off, and we're screaming, we got to put that dog to sleep. Well, stop agitating the dog. And when I say that, I mean they're agitating the public. You have the public so agitated on both sides. I'm like, I can't believe, I do believe it, but I'm amazed that the public is just like, they don't get that they're being herded here. That's going to be the real wake-up call. And again, I think it's going to be financial because we know that the stock market's a bubble. By any stretch of any imagination, the country is in shambles financially, and when the stuff hits the fan, this is going to get really ugly. So, again,
all right, Dave.
Yeah, I sense a change.
Quick question for you, Dave. Do you agree that this is planned and well-financed?
Well, I would say yes, but I'm not going to say by whom.
Right, I understand.
Obviously, it's like agitating the dog. There's something going on here. And again, I'm always very leery of double psyops. Always very leery of them. Because things normally are not what they seem. Is that correct?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
The Beirut bombing's a perfect one. Gone from the radar screen. What are you talking about? The biggest explosion in God knows how long. And all of a sudden, it's not even news anymore.
They blew up a city.
Well, and again, there's always that one country that we could never mention. So, again, go back to the Jeffrey Epstein thing. Who was Jeffrey Epstein working for? The intelligence services. Whose intelligence services? I'll let the listeners figure that out for themselves. So you never know. Are we having a double PSYOP run on us? Possibly. And is this financed? Obviously, because this stuff, as I said months ago, you can't have pallets of bricks show up in a town and not know where they came from. They had to come from a supply house. It's that simple.
Yeah, and there's video of them being dropped off. There's no doubt about it. All you got to do is look at the surveillance.
And then my question is, how come they haven't shown them? Are you telling me with all the cops with license plate readers, nobody had a license plate reader that saw a truck delivering pallets of bricks? Please. That's beyond any. I mean, a third grader with a criminal mind should be able to figure that out. Again, it's completely gone from the radar screen, though. We've moved on. So, Jim?
All right, Jim, I think I'm going to throw you the Chairman Powell question. He made his statement to the press after Jackson Hole, and I was watching it, and it was like he was basically said, that's all we got, boys and girls. And it was like he can't fight inflation now. And although he didn't confirm QE to infinity, he might as well have. He might have just come out and said, we're done, kids. That's all I can do. Any thoughts on Jackson Hole and the Fed this year or this week?
The Fed, the Fed's out of juice. Okay, of all the tools they use, of all the means and ways that they have Keynesian approach towards trying to adjust markets and business, but mostly business, they've used it all, and it's worked on the market. Once they got central banks to start buying in the open market, the various high flyers, and as long as the populace saw a bull market going wild, they got the idea something must be okay in the business area. But he did, as you say, it is QE to infinity. We know that. We knew that the day it started. We know that for a fact now by absolute data. And it's not going to stop because it can stop. It's all they have. There's nothing left in there. There's no reverse this or double that. It doesn't work. There's nothing left to do except to hold it up long enough to hopefully meet the goals that they put out for what was so magnificently explained by Bill and by David. David, that was absolutely articulate, okay? I couldn't add even a word to that and make it better. It was a magnificent review of circumstances as they are. There's no difference between that and finance, except that when you get to the bottom of it, it's all finance. When did all of this break loose? When the shortest term lending market blew up. Underneath all this, there's a financial crisis. The most convenient pandemic in the history of the world is this COVID thing, and who knows who knows how it started? Who knows if it was planned? Who knows if it was manufactured? I don't, but its convenience is outrageous because it came right on almost on the day of the explosion and public understanding that the repo market was no longer in functioning. So remember, this is primarily financial, and I think that the political planning has lost control of themselves. I think that the true moderate Democrat, that really believes in that thesis, is having a very hard time with the fact that what's being offered for president has been cloned by the squad. They know that socialism has never, ever worked anywhere at any time. They also know Hitler was on a socialist ticket. Germany knows that. Germany would react faster than we would because that's what the Germans did to the Jews. They put on the badges. They had to wear a mask, except the mask was sewn on their clothing. Okay, nothing to do there, boys. We've seen it before, and we're not playing that game. So you just look at this in terms of history. Understand what the major factor here is. Know that this horrible disease, and it is that because it is not just what it does to you now, it's what it does to you later. And it's still rolling forward. It is, it's too convenient to be convenient. And so logic says we are in trouble. And looking at what just took place, big mistake to harass the senators and congressmen and heads of committees and things like that coming out of that convention. Very poor planning. In fact, it probably that was paid for and delivered because it's too stupid to be stupid. And what it really does is it's got the moderate Democrat looking at either not voting or not casting a vote based on let's keep Trump out. There's a little bit of shift there. Then take a look at what Ron Paul did. What you have to see is when he defended the policeman. Okay? The guy's got guts. When they knocked over the policeman, he caught him. And he yanked him straight back up again. Yeah, well, he needed the policeman. That's for darn sure. But that was an act of bravery. That was an act of honor. That was an act of courage. A coward doesn't do that. So on one side, you see these cowards, dressed in black, screaming and yelling and harassing old goats and geezers coming out. They're like a little old lady with white hair. Give me a break. Same time, you see an elected official said, "Bullshit! I'm not taking this." Turning around and take the cop away from the anarchists. Yes, something has changed. They went too far, and I think they've blown it. Okay, and I'm very happy because I don't care. I want my country, and however we get to keep it is the way I want it. If we don't tame this down, this will develop into a revolution. Not just some kids that come up, with having not reasoned out what they were about to do. The kids that were acted as to defend the rights because the police weren't there and ended up killing some people. Now they're in big trouble. No, that was wonderful what was said. David and Bill, you said it perfectly. Okay? And this is a change. There's no question about it. And there is nothing we're dealing with now, in my opinion, incorrectly. It is new because all of this never happened before. Hey, the Boston Tea Party and one shot on a hill started a nation to overturn the strongest army in the world, the British. That's happening every 20 minutes now, and it's not going to happen without exploding. So you guys have nailed it. The question you gave me was a good question, Denny, but it's nothing in comparison to the question you've asked my colleagues, and they've already answered better than I can. That's it.
All right, Bill. Jim thinks you're perfect. Here's one for you to be perfect again. I've been reading. I sent you this. That many of the credit card companies are tightening their card holders' credit limits. I did some research on extraneous purchases of gold and silver, and as I got deeper and deeper into it, it looks to me like those credit limits that have been expanding for families for the last 90 days have all of a sudden started to contract. And so, Bill, if the credit lines for everyday citizens are shrinking at the same time the floodgates are opened up for the big boys, consumer spending is about to tighten up. I can't see it any other way. Have you got a perspective on this one, Bill?
Well, I think you're exactly right. And David has called this socialism for socialism for the rich, so socialism for corporations. The problem is the little guy is now drowning. I mean, they've been treading water for however many years, and now you've had untold amounts of people blow through their savings just to be able to eat. And I think yesterday or the day before, I saw an article where 25% of of income is now from the government?
Yes.
I mean, really?
I saw it too.
That's insane. That's insane because the government doesn't have money. They don't have money to give out. They take in tax money and redistribute it, but they're not taking in enough tax money because the system's not big enough to provide for what they're spending. So deficit spending. And I mean, how much is the debt going to expand this year alone? 30%? 40%? Really? I mean, this is, pardon me?
To infinity, Bill.
Yeah, I mean, to insanity.
Yeah.
QE to insanity. I mean, this is
Yes,
mathematically game over. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's just the math does not. The math does not add up, and it cannot add up.
David, early on, it was either you or Bill said that the government, by way of these, and these are the local governments, state, that they were picking winners and losers. The largest portion of the American economy is from individual proprietors and small to mid-sized businesses. But in this lockdown, those folks have literally been locked out of their livelihoods while the big corporations were considered to be vital and were allowed to stay open. David, it was a corporate takeover of small and mid-sized businesses' markets. The small proprietors, mid-size, they're about to be starved out, and yet they're hanging on by a thread. But I don't think I have ever seen such a perfect example of the government picking winners over losers. From my standpoint, Dave, that's one of the single biggest reasons the stock market has been exploding. But I'm interested in what you're thinking.
Well, Denny, it's funny because I had this conversation. Old friend of mine came to visit me today. We used to be in the real estate business together, and we had this exact same conversation. You know, let's use as an example. Earlier this week, the airlines came out and says, we're going to have to lay off 19,000 more people unless you give us more money. And I'm screaming at them, let them go broke. I don't care if the airline goes broke, and I don't care if 19,000 people lose their job. That's what capitalism is. Somebody will buy those airplanes sooner or later and put them back in the air. We have been picking winners and losers for way too long. And this shutdown screwed the little guys. You know, my friend who I'm talking about, he likes to go out and eat. He's very well off, and he likes, you know, him and his wife go out quite a bit. And like he said, there's not a restaurant that has not been decimated. First off, we live in resort areas, so they have a very limited time to make all their money. Normally, for a restaurant to make its money in a seasonal business, let's say in the summer, it has to stockpile cash all summer long to make it through the lean winter months when there's nobody here. Well, you've crushed them. So you know what's going to be left? When this is all said and done, the government's going to bail out the big chain restaurants because they're going to get bailout money, or they'll get bought out for pennies on the dollar, and they'll take them public all over again. They are single-handedly destroying Middle America here. So there's certain sections of Middle America, like I have friends in the contracting business who have been having their busiest year ever. I have friends who are in the commercial dog game, and they have big commercial boarding kennels. They're down 90%. 90%. You know why? Because people aren't traveling, so they're not leaving their dogs at the commercial kennels. 90%. Like someone said to me, I'm closing up. There is no hope. We're coming into winter, which is our traditionally slowest period. We're dead. Close the business. So, yeah, Denny, I mean, this is pre-planned. This is what I've said earlier. This is a process. None of this happens by accident. Nothing happens nowadays by accident in our country. It's too big. When people have oodles of money, they hire the best and the brightest to figure out all these things, and then they also get to lobby the government like the airlines screaming, we need another bailout. What good is another bailout going to do? You to pay the flight attendants to just sit home? Look, let United, let Delta, let them all go broke. I really don't care. They'll figure it out. That's what capitalism is. And we don't have capitalism. There hasn't been capitalism in this country because that's my buddy said to me, remember the cash for clunkers? Yeah, I do. And what did I say to him? I said, remember General Motors was going to come back and they were going to take over the market on the Chevy Volt, the electric car. How many people do you know own Chevy Volts?
One.
I know zero.
Zero.
I know. I bet you I could name 20 people, though, who own Teslas.
Yep.
Wait a minute. Chevy Volt is a $35,000 middle income car. Tesla is a $100,000 high-end car. Oh, but by the way, they got a $7,500 tax break for buying. What? The guy had $100,000 to blow on a car that he really doesn't need, and he gets a $7,500 bonus from the government. And Elon Musk now is one of the richest guys in the world next. Oh, to who? Oh, Jeff Bezos. So all the little mom and pop shops, all the little sports shops got put out of business, and Jeff Bezos is now worth something like $200 billion? Please. This is a planned destruction. Absolutely. I feel sorry for people. I hope our listeners had heeded what we've said. The Richest Man in Babylon is a book everybody should read. And that is what the gist of it is. Every single penny you make on every dollar, 20 cents should go in your pocket first before you pay anybody. And then you will have a nest egg when this is all over. If you haven't done that, you're dead.
As long as you saved in the proper medium.
Well,
Right.
and again, that's a whole nother story. But, yeah.
I read that book in the 1960s, and, David, this is not an exaggeration. I think I've given away over 250 copies of that to my clients' children to teach them the story of saving money. That's amazing you've read that book, too. It's a great book. It's a great book.
Simple math. Pay yourself first. Don't
Yes,
live
sir.
paycheck to paycheck. Pay yourself first.
I think those old rules are about to be relearned as we go into an entirely new economy. Jim, only in these sorts of conditions can we see a weaker economy lead to a stronger stock market. It's amazing that the weaker the economy gets, the stronger the stock market gets. And I'm struggling with the propaganda that must be necessary to keep this illusion alive. And truthfully, I don't know how they're able to do it. Have you got any thoughts about weak economy and strong stock market?
Sure. When MOPE, finally the management of prospective economics, the management of consumer demand, via their psychological reaction to a super bull market, stopped. The last thing in the world that can stop is the super bull market, because then you have negative MOPE, and the world couldn't stand negative MOPE. And that's what a crashing security market would be. If a booming is MOPE, then it crashes negative MOPE. Okay? That's why it can't happen. That's why the Central Bank of Switzerland, as it mirrored for all other major central banks, have been buying a group of shares that shouldn't be selling at 3,000 or 2,000, that should be selling at 3 or 2. And what it's done is, and as long as they can manufacture money, or as long as a manufacturer of money will keep them funded, they'll be buying it. You see 300, 330 in a split second. I mean, you're seeing things that you make your eyeballs spin. But it's nothing. There is nothing that isn't without cause and effect. And what they've accomplished in by keeping the general equity markets rigged higher, and therefore keeping the public somewhat asleep, is going to come back and cost a fortune. When this goes apart, which it's about to, it will be 1932. It will be 2032 before you've got any chance of seeing something worthwhile happen again. We're going into more than 10 years of payback for this facade that's been created for purely political reasons, and they're amazed it worked.
All right, Bill. you've been sharing the emails we've been receiving. It appears to me that folks still don't get the connection of money to gold and the connection of money to currencies. We got a question from Scottsdale this week, and it's very direct. If I decide to sell a piece of gold because I need to purchase food or energy or anything else, what does my local coin dealer give me in exchange for my gold? Bill, this is a perfect opportunity to get the connection between money, currency, and wealth even. You want to give it a shot?
Yeah. First off, people need to understand that silver and gold are money themselves. And if you go back in history, if you look at the names of current currencies, you have the pound, you have the peso, you have the lira. What are all of those? Those are weights. And when I'm saying weights, they're putting weights on pieces of paper, because all of these pieces of paper originally were derivatives of gold and silver. So gold and silver are money themselves. And the question, what will my coin dealer give me? I guess the answer is whatever the current currency is, because gold and silver are money themselves. They have value themselves. Whatever is being used as currency, that's what you're going to get. And what people don't understand is gold and silver don't go up and down in value. What goes up and down in value are the currencies. So when gold is going higher, it means that the currency that you're quoting it in, whether it's in dollars or pounds or euros or what have you, those currencies are losing purchasing power. I mean, you could use a cup of coffee as a yardstick. If the cup of coffee is going up, if it costs more to purchase a cup of coffee, it means that the value of the currency that you're using has gone down. So I wouldn't get hung up and think, oh my gosh, they're going to go to a new currency and I'm not going to have any of it. Well, nobody's going to have any of it. Whatever you have now in banks or whatever will get converted, and you're probably going to lose purchasing power in the conversion. But you're not losing purchasing power in your gold and silver. And those can always be converted, or, and I've said this many times, you can go to a local farmer with a 1964 or earlier silver dime, give the dime, and you'll get a dozen eggs. So I mean, you can actually you can use the metal itself in barter form, and there's no telling what an ounce of gold will purchase. It might purchase one of the Teslas Dave was just talking about, or more. So okay. I hope that answered it.
David, following up on that question from Scottsdale, the writer had a couple questions, and they also ask about the traceability of the selling of a gold coin. Now, Dave, we're not accountants, and we don't give tax advice. But with or without traceability of the selling of precious metals being a taxable event, I'm pretty sure that it is. Now, that being said, what do you think will be happening in the sales of gold coins in the future? Will it be black market, gray market, behind the market? What do you think it's going to look like?
Oh, baby, oh, baby, oh, baby.
All right. Three times I want you to say, I'm not a CPA, I'm not a CPA, I'm not a CPA.
I definitely am not, and I definitely don't give that type of advice. But I can give you some analogies. Again, this is why they're going to go to a digital currency, in my opinion, because what we're talking about, and I'll just use what I know for a fact because I have researched this. So let's say I bought, say 100 coins at $400, and when gold was at $800, I sold them. I am responsible for notifying the government that, in fact, I turned a profit on those coins and paid the tax on that. Now,
absolutely.
again, that's my opinion. that people take it for what it's worth. I did speak to an accountant about this. Obviously, I'm, not a tax attorney, but this is what they told me. And
yeah,
again,
you stayed in a Holiday Inn last night.
Right. And I also know that, you could travel overseas, and if you leave the country and you have more than $10,000 and don't declare it, they have the right to grab it at the airport. And I also do know, and this is a fact because I had it looked up and I paid a tax attorney, if you're traveling overseas and you are carrying gold coins, and let's say right now gold's $2,000 an ounce, just to keep it simple, 10 coins is technically $20,000. But that is not correct because a coin is a stamped. Gold coins that I'm talking about, American Eagles, are stamped $50. So that is 20 times 50, not 20 times 2,000. Again,
as long as it's a sovereign coin, Dave.
That's
as long as it's a government-issued coin.
So that being said, there's a lot of leadway here. Because if you go to a pawn shop, and again, this is an interesting thing that I've been looking at the past several weeks with the premium in silver. Now, I'm sitting here saying I think silver is a bargain at $27. I mean, are you out of your mind? I've already backed the truck up over my lifetime to the silver bandwagon, and I still look at this price go, this price is ridiculously low. And I'm jumping up and down in my chair as I'm looking at the news, and I'm clicking on Kitco for an example. It says, wait a minute. So if I sell Kitco my coins, they're going to give me 27 and 50 cents. If I want to buy them from Kitco, they're $36, and I'm like, so the street kid in me says, wait a minute, you're screwing me. How? If I give you the coin, you're going to give me 27, but when I want that coin back, it's 36. Do you have a mask and a gun? Because you're robbing me. You're robbing me. Oh, I mean, the street stuff to me freaks me out because it's like, wait a minute, I just gave you that damn candy bar. It was worth $1. Now I want the candy bar back, and it's $2. That's bizarre. And again, the American public has been dumbed down so bad, they, one, don't know what real money is, and they have no idea what's happening to them with the loss of the fact that they don't have real money. So, the technical answer to the question is absolutely you are supposed to fill your little form out, and you tell them what exactly it is you did. And because obviously there's ways around that. I don't want to get into it. It's like, it's common sense. You could do a street transaction between somebody and, obviously he's not going to 1099 you if you happen to buy a coin off your neighbor. So that all being said, what people really need to figure out is how they're going to manage when the digital currency comes, because I am certain that's where we're going, is to a digital currency. And again, there's complicated things like setting up trusts, offshore trusts, and it's all legal, but it's also very expensive. A lot of the average people, it's not within an average person's means to do it. You have to be an absolute whack job, over the top, paranoid person. And, that would be me. And 20 years ago, long before any of this happened, start doing this stuff. So again, we're in uncharted territory. There's a lot of things on the air that I just will not want. I don't want to get into talking about, but those are the peripherals. Right. Take it for what it's worth.
You pointed us in the right direction. Bill, did you want to say something?
No.
All right. Jim, I'm a student of history, and I enjoy reading about history. There was a testimonial from Pliny the Younger about his uncle, Pliny the Elder, who was a statesman and a warrior that died in the last days of Pompeii. And when you read that account from Pliny the Younger, he just says everybody was watching it, everybody was paying attention, but they had no idea how bad it was. I don't want to draw that to my perspective of California. The difference, of course, is that in lieu of Mount Vesuvius, there's mountains of debt, oppressive taxation, crumbling infrastructure, and an abusive government at all levels that is about to explode. Jim, as of now, California isn't East Germany or any other communist country of the 50s, 60s, or 70s. People can leave, and some of them are, but a lot of them are just staying. How do you think this is going to affect the financial lives of the citizens that remain in New York, New York City, California. What's going to happen to them, Jim?
Exactly what's happened every time the far left social phenomena has taken control of an area. And it exists today if you go around the places where that's happened in the world. They're going to turn themselves into waste dumps. What's going to be left in New York is going to be quite scary. They're piling out of there as fast as they can. They're paying prices in excess of offering prices in a real estate market that doesn't support that here in Lower Connecticut because they can do that. We're seeing changes taking place which have occurred elsewhere. As a student of history and the quotation you've given, people cannot really understand change, even though the most constant thing in your life has been what? Change. And they're going to hang on, a very good amount of them, and hang on all the way until, like in Cuba, they gave citizens wonderful jobs. They had to work 7 days a week just to get enough food to maintain life. This is serious. This has gone much too far. This is out of hand. This may be not controllable. It could explode at any time. I mean, going back to what we said before, a very small group of people started a war against the strongest army in the world in the birth of this country. Well, you've got something going on much more serious, much larger, much more dangerous. Weapons then were as dangerous as weapons are now. And then it started a wonderful change that was brought about by men and women of courage and honor. And today, the people in charge are men and women of satanic principles. And what they may bring on for a period of time could be the most uncomfortable experience between now and 32. And what it's going to do, I think, is give us a clean canvas that we can draw on again. Because I believe in the spirit of the people where we are, and I think you see the spirit of the people in Germany. That mistake was made once. They're not going to let the mistake happen to them. You put a mask on me, what's the difference between putting a mask on me or sewing a star on my shirt? It's the same thing. So, you know, this is it's not fun to predict. It is inevitable that it is destabilizing, and that our listeners must understand that it's back to basics, that it's self-preservation. They need to look, and it's not too late, as to how to take care of themselves in very bad weather that we see constantly. When the trees come down and take down all the power wires, when our food stores are out of basic vital food, there's no question now. It was born in the Boy Scouts. Be prepared. And if you refuse to be prepared, suffer the consequences quietly. But you will suffer the consequences. That's my answer.
The busiest transactions that are taking place right now in vehicles in New York City are the U-Haul dealerships. It looks like all the young people said they've had enough and they're renting U-Hauls one way to get out of town. I have not seen that in California, but all right, Bill.
Well, is that not a shift of the Democrat middle, and rather than the Democrat far left?
Right. You've lost the young people and even the middle-aged people. They said, "I've had enough. I can't make it work. I'm getting the heck out of here." So
they are. There is a mass exodus.
So Bill,
anybody who can is, period. Anybody who can't.
David,
Danny,
go ahead.
I just want to expound on that 1 second of what Jim's saying. And it's funny because my buddy who was here, we were in the real estate business together. We did development work. And, he lives in Connecticut also. And he lives in a fairly well-off town. So he's experiencing exactly what Jim's talking about. They're all running here and buying houses. And I looked at my friend and I said, wait a minute. So if the top end of the market is disintegrating, because New York City, which is, an entry-level apartment's $1 million, so you're going to run out and you're going to go to Ridgefield or Wilton, Connecticut or Greenwich, and you're going to get into something for 7, 8, 900, $1 million, 1, 2, whatever the number is. How does this continue to work? Because the low end has been decimated. We already covered that. They have no jobs. Their $600 a week check is gone. If they were in the restaurant business, they were waiters, waitresses, chefs, whatever it is, that job's decimated. If you worked in the theater industry, that job's decimated. Cinemas, decimated, gone. Car rental, completely gone. And you can't put this back together. You can't open the airlines and have people travel. Dog business, gone. I can go make this list. Hotels, restaurants, gone. I mean, all types of things are now gone, and things that are still allowed are operating at 50%. Nobody had a business that made money at 50%, or they would have been making oodles and jingles of money, and they'd be Amazon.com. So what Jim's talking about is correct. They are going to wake up and say, okay, I ran away from it there, but see, the problem isn't there. The problem is the whole system. This is what, again, Jim's getting at. Throughout history, when you allow your society to become this corrupted that you're passing out money. We laughed 2 years ago when they said, these European countries are going to give everybody a basic income. Well, what are we doing here? As Jim said, Bill, 25% of the country's income came from the government last quarter. Bill, I saw the same story, so you are correct on that. Insane. So how does this end? It can't. The taxes in these towns are going to go through the roof because the schools are loading up. In my jurisdiction, which is, again, I'm in the middle of nowhere, I think I was told 60 new kids enrolled in the grammar school in my area. That's more kids than I think were in the grammar school. The strain on the towns where the people are moving into is going to cause taxes to go through the roof, and the strains on the town where they're leaving are going to force taxes to go absolutely astronomical. This ends badly, and that's what Jim's trying to explain to people, and this is not a quick fix. 2032, Jim, I give you credit if they pull this off in 12 years.
Well, in 12 years, I mean the damage and the pain will have been suffered. Then the rebuilding starts. They're not going to pull it off in 12 years.
This is a 12-year downstroke, in my opinion.
That's correct, a 12-year downstroke.
So
remember from the Bible when the temple was destroyed and in the Babylonian exile, they called it diaspora, and the Jews went everywhere. The diaspora, I think, means dispersion, but the Jews ended up everywhere. Well, I'm not saying that everybody in the cities are Jewish, of course. I'm saying that there is a great migration about to take place, and it will be into the quiet places where Dave and Jim and Bill and Denny are living. It will happen, and it will happen fairly quickly as they get the hell out of Dodge. Hey, Bill, the stock market is exploding upwards at the same time that the underlying businesses are suffering from debt issues, lower sales, pretty crappy productivity in some cases from remote work. In many cases, this is going to lead to bankruptcy. Bill, what a lot of people forget as they're playing this Russian roulette in the stock market is the first ones to suffer in a bankruptcy are the stockholders. Why doesn't anybody see this coming, Bill?
I think because people generally don't want to see it coming. I guess it's denial. I mean, I don't remember when it was, probably early May. We mentioned, I know Dave said something about it, Jim said, we've all said something about it, that shorting the stock market through fundamental eyes looks like the right thing to do, because the market was grossly overvalued even when the Dow was at 20,000 or 22,000 or whatever. And we cautioned people, don't short the stock market, because what you may be seeing, and it appears so. I mean, with what Powell said this past week, it pretty much appears like we're headed toward a hyperinflation. And in a hyperinflation, if you look at the stock markets of countries that have gone through hyperinflation, their stock markets go through the roof in that local currency. Versus gold, they generally end up losing 50% of their purchasing power, but it's one hell of a chart. It's straight up. Stock markets go up about half as fast as their currency loses value. So I know that didn't really answer your question, but I think people are in denial, and they don't want to imagine that their account, that they've worked for the last 20 years, 40 years, 50 years, that their savings could be decimated. So they bury their head in the sand and look at the paper each night or watch the news each night, and they cheer the stock market on.
It's just like you have always said, people think that they can get into gold at the last minute. People think they're going to be able to get out of the stock market at the last minute, and I don't think
good luck with that.
I don't think either one of those are possible.
Can I just add to that 1 second too, Denny?
I know what you're going to say, Dave.
I have personal friends who, when the market was plunging, did what appeared to be the right thing, and they liquidated their positions. Because the fundamentals in their mind were never coming back. This is my point. I'm cleaning out. I'm, too close to retirement to play this game one more time. I'm out. Do you know, in every one of those cases, those people right now are freaking out. They're driving themselves out of their mind. I can't believe I got scared out. All I had to do was stay in, and everything would have been okay. Fear and greed. Because you don't see anybody selling out now. They're convinced that, oh, look, see, always buy the dip. They've been conditioned. Buy the dip. Just buy the dip. Just buy the dip. Buy the dip. Until one time that trap door opens and you're like, but where's the bungee cord? So be careful here. Own your precious metals. Store them by yourself. It's safe, easy. Cover your bases.
Look, when you can manufacture the money to buy the outrageously priced shares through a beard or hiding the activity of some of a treasury very close to us, the stock market will continue to rise. And what limits that is the size of the balance sheet of the central bank and its effect on all currencies, but specifically on the currency of the specific central bank. So we see the Fed balance sheet continually rise. But what we don't really see clearly is what items are involved in that balance sheet and what the value of those items are. The hit that's going to be taken is a collapse of sovereign debt due to the expansion of sovereign positions in general equities with manufactured money or zero margin. The leverage is infinite, and it gets more so every day, and that's not possible. So the reckoning is out there, and it will come. And the thesis is, stop trying to be a trader. Don't try and be the richest man in the United States. Get enough to get. Do you have food for 2 years? Okay. Do you have bottled water that you can't get your car into the garage? Yeah, that's exactly what I have. And it doesn't matter what happens out there. This thing is like an armory. I'll take care of myself. Thank you very much. I don't need your help. It has come down to that. And there's one group who are dancing like they were in 1929, insanely. And there's another group looking around saying, nah, this is going to come to an end, and I know exactly how it's going to come to an end. Nobody on zero margin has ever been able to last even a sovereign, okay? And the blow-up is international. And the biggest lie in the world is the USDX index of currencies, because all of them are going down. And the one that seems to be going up is only the one that's going down, not as fast as the other one. It's a upside down image in a mirror. What Bill was saying about the cup of coffee and the price is the best lesson anybody can ever get about a standard versus currency. Which is going up and which is going down. Okay? You know, somebody sees these stocks at 3,000 and plus it shouldn't be there. Cheers for the stock, but what they're cheering for is the currency disappearing. Okay? The example, the cup of coffee. You can pay $5 for a cup of coffee if you get your latte with skin this milk and put that on there and 2 sugars or whatever. The currencies are falling apart. And at the same time, the markets are rallying to new highs, which is, as Bill explained, totally classical. And the speculator that is continuing this rig are the central banks. When did the central banks ever deal in equities before? Now they do, because nobody can afford negative MOP, something we discussed before. So you can see all of these things coalescing together. And I don't know what day it's going to happen, but I do know that burning the cities every night is extraordinarily bad and extraordinarily dangerous and totally out of hand. And it seems to be a political ploy because the management of the areas of greatest destabilization are all under the same management. Okay? So it's coming. And personally, I think it's here. I think when you look back, you'll say it started on June 19th or something like that? And it will end in 3032, the period of unwind, prior to the period of rebuilding. This is the war between light and darkness. This is Leviticus explanation of the apocalypse, not the standard explanation of the apocalypse. It's real. It's happening. It's there. There's no question. Wake up. That's my answer.
That leads me to the last question of the day, and Uncle David, you get it. So assuming that one is wise enough to have converted their paper wealth to real wealth in the form of precious metals or miners of precious metals, the world could soon be a cornucopia of assets for sale at fire prices. Now, once again, we're not investment advisors, although I was one in a former life. We really don't give investment advice. Nevertheless, Dave, we can make some assumptions of values that will present themselves to savvy investors at some point. Dave, if you were so benefited from the rise in precious metals and miners, where might Dave be looking for investment opportunities in the future?
On Mars, and I would call Cliff High because he would get my
You butthead.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
hey, but again, we may not be too far off. That's almost a loaded question because it depends on how bad things get. And it's funny because my friend who was here, who I only see maybe once a year when I happen to be in this area, and, again, we were very close. We grew up together. We owned way too much real estate together, which is why I hate this stuff now. And we were talking about friends of ours who still are major, major players in the state. I mean, we're talking major malls, strip malls, massive apartment complexes. And I looked at them and I said, but so think about how decimated that is. Because now with the $600 going, all the apartments are going vacant. So at what point do you want to step in and buy apartment buildings? And we look at each other, oh, yeah, who even knows? Malls. I don't think malls are ever coming back. So to be honest with you, my crystal ball is drawing a flat-out blank other than survival gear. I mean, I'm dead serious because the fundamentals are so bad. As Jim explained, the MOPE has been so over the top. The federal banks of each country own the stock market. Abe out of Japan, who is ill and is going to retire. And how did that experiment work for the Japanese? Where's their market at? It's still half of what it was back in the 80s. So when this happens worldwide, like Jim's talking about, and I believe it is a worldwide plan because every single Western nation seems to be in on it, Australia, New Zealand, go down the whole Five Eyes list. So this thing stinks to high heavens. Denny, I think the only thing we could do is preserve our wealth and try to come out the other end. And when you pick up the lid, look around and say, oh, my God, and reevaluate. Because, again, I am a bargain guy. And my buddy from the real estate game, he's hardcore into the high-end antiques. And he's telling me about, you could pick up a chair for $60,000 and flip it for $400,000 at the Sotheby's auction. Because right now, money is like, it's crazy. It's crazy. There's money that's being traded hands. And I don't know where we're going with this. I think, as Jim said, this reset, we're ending up with a digital currency, in my guess, and live in a pretty much a 100% police state. Unfortunately, that's what I think is coming. Perfect socialist environment. We're dead.
Standard operating practice, isn't it? Where was it any different? Germany? Come on. South America? Look. You're both absolutely correct.
Frightening is the only way I could put it. Thank God.
And half of this country, according to pollsters, which really probably doesn't mean anything, but if we were to believe it, half of this country wants it.
Well, of course they want it. Universal basic income and health care for all. Who doesn't want it? It's like,
you're going to die from the health care. Okay,
it's called the FSA.
Yeah, you get an appointment 5 years from now for cancer.
So, again, I hate to be – I normally have a look out. But as I say to my wife all the time, thank God I want to say I'm at the end of the game as far as, I've lived a pretty decent life. I'm like,
Dave, you're in your 60s. Dave, you could live to be 120. You really could, brother.
Not a chance.
That's a scary thought.
That's a scary thought. But in any case, yeah, that's what I say to people. Try and protect your wealth. And along the way, don't get committed to anything till this all shakes out. Because I have a friend.
How about being content? How about aiming at being content? Okay, how about aiming at being able to eat? How about aiming at, if you can, at paying off your debt, or at least consolidating it so you're not paying 20% interest rate, and get the hell and be able to get out of it, or pray that you can get out of it. How about going opposite to the trends that are all out there now? Because that's what you have to do. That's called back to basics.
Well,
Dave, if you get a house with 47 rooms, and right now my house is so small I could wear it.
Okay. Yeah, they have a whole show about that called Tiny Houses, Jim. Tiny houses.
We're not that far, but I'm not that far off as I look at a bed in the living room and my dog sleeping in it.
Closing statement, Denny.
Go ahead,
I do have something. Again, we've seen that you don't really want to live in major metropolitan areas. And let's say you don't have the money to do all these crazy things that we talk about all the time. You're just like, trying to get by. Then my advice would be is to relocate to someplace where, as Catherine Austin Fitz describes, where you have a local community that will feed you. What made the Great Depression nowhere near as depressing as it would be now is there were so many farms all around the country that you could usually find some place to, well, how about I get to stay here and, you feed me and I'll work the fields. That game's gone. We have factory farms now. So, I would seriously recommend try and put yourself in a position, if you're concerned about your well-being going forward, put yourself in a position where, you have the ability to still earn enough money to, have a decent lifestyle. Because some of my best friends make $35,000 a year, and they are so happy. And I have friends who make several $1 million a year, and they're so stressed out. My friends, like, people who work in ski resorts and stuff like that, they're happy all the time. They're just happy. Don't get hung up on having to have a ton of money. Have a means of a community where you could feed yourself.
Yeah, be content. Get rid of things you don't need. Okay? I used to have front engine I had 17 race cars. Right now, I got the cheapest Dodge van they sell. Okay, and that's it. I've done what I have. I have not just made my lips move. I have done what needs to be done, and I've insulated everything, and that's what you have to do.
All right, closing statement. David, you've given me yours. Jim, have you got anything else you want to share?
Well, I want to share thanks to my comrades, because my comrades sounds bad, my colleagues. The opening question was really the toughest, and the explanations that I heard were simple, easy to understand, and absolutely dead on. I come out of these weekly conversations not only glad to be with my friends, but I learned by this. And we never stop learning, okay? Never stop learning. Go back to basics. That's what I keep hearing, and that's what I've done.
Bill, closing statement, last pig to the trough.
Yeah, I think I mentioned something along these lines a couple weeks ago. I really want to congratulate you, Jim. You have coined way in the past terms that mainstream media is now using. How often do we hear the term reset? How often do we hear the term QE to infinity? And I actually read a couple mainstream articles this past week talking about none other than MOPE.
Really?
So, yes. So, well, and the reason being because, I mean, they're flat out lying as to what's, and not just the media, but they're flat out lying on what's happening. And that is management of perspective economics. So, Jim, you were so far ahead that, I mean, looking back, it just amazes me that you came up with these terms. And of course, nobody has given you credit, so I figured I'd give you credit on it. I mean, you go back when it was just you and I doing these weekly calls. I guess it was 4 years ago, and you were talking about back to basics, and the questions that we were getting every week basically were, when's my gold going to go up? I hope people understand now how far ahead of where we are now you were throughout all these years. So I just want to give you credit where credit is definitely due.
I appreciate it, Bill, but if you really want pain, be early.
I understand,
yeah.
Dave, and I understand that.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
That's so true. Sometimes people say when you're early, you're still wrong, and that's not true. You're early, but you're willing to do that. There's a trade-off. And
it's called pain.
Yeah, it's called pain.
Okay.
Well, folks, that's all we have for you this week. I have to tell you, this is probably the best hour and 8 minutes of my week. I enjoy this every week, and with friends and people that I respect from their perspective alone. I hope you can dig in and enjoy it as much as I have. We will be back with you next week. It'll be Labor Day weekend, if you can believe it. The summer just blew past us. And with that, we'll refer you to the website, jsmindset.com, and we will talk to you next week.